good morning, everyone. How's it going? So what am I working on today? Well, I got a 2017 Buick Encore. And the customer came in, said the check engine light is on. It started surging on them. They went to a parts store and had it scanned, and they told them it was an oxygen sensor. Okay. I have... one day I'm going to make another video on that. I have a big problem with that. With parts stores telling you what's wrong. And I'll explain that at some point. It is acting funny right now. See the RPM? And I don't know if you can hear it, but the engine is basically like warbling. It's kind of going like it's got a little bit of a misfire to it. Now the other thing I noticed right off the bat, as soon as I got in the car and I started, change oil comes right on the cluster there. And also, it says the oil change was due July of 23 at 71,000. It's got 82,000 on it now. Doesn't mean anything. They could have had the oil changed and somebody didn't change the sticker and reset the oil change minder. It's possible. I see that all the time. But we're going to check that. So now it's also got a traction control light on and service StabiliTrak light, or not service, but StabiliTrak is on. See that? So what we're going to do is we're going to do a code scan. I want to see what's here. But it's running terribly. So, map sensor, O2, fuel trim. Fuel trim could be because of map sensor. Low voltage, let's see. So, all right, let's let this finish its scan, and then we'll get back to it. All right, so the scan is done. So we have manifold absolute pressure sensor performance, O2 low voltage, fuel trim lean, engine misfire detected, intake airflow system performance, O2 stuck lean. Now, I got a funny feeling these codes may be from, or vacuum leak related. Okay, let's see. Okay, so the anti-lock brakes, the system is disabled because of engine DTCs. BCM, power mode switch, short to ground, not worried about that. Okay, we're not really worried about any of these BCM codes. Wow, there's a ton of them. Yeah, we're not worried about those right now. Usually when you see a whole ton of codes, usually it's voltage related. Wow, okay. Yeah, we're not worried about those, but the engine codes is what we are worried about. Now, they went to the parts store, and the parts store said, oh, it's got O2 codes. Well, what about all the other codes? They're trying to sell them an O2 sensor. That's what they're trying to do. Do I think it's an O2 sensor? No, I don't think it's an O2 sensor. Could it be an O2 sensor? Additionally, yes, it could be. O2 sensor is not going to fix this problem. Map sensor performance, stuff like that. Let's look under the hood. I got a funny feeling there's a vacuum leak, or we got something with this map sensor. All right, actually, I'm gonna screenshot all of this stuff real quick. All right, so that thing is running absolutely terribly. I swear I hear a hissing noise on this thing somewhere. Hold on a second. Now, one thing, these things are notorious for the PCV system creating internal vacuum leaks. PCV is actually the valve cover itself. But I swear I hear a vacuum leak. Oh. Clear it up. You notice that, right? It cleared up. Now it's getting worse again. I think it's over here somewhere. Let's let that dry up. Doing this will temporarily plug up, not plug up, but it'll temporarily get sucked into a vacuum leak. Be super careful when you're doing something like this. You can create a fire. So just something to think about. All right, so we know, hear how it's chugging again? Okay, so it's not right there. And let that dry up. And I'm going to move to the next section. What I'm going to probably do is have to smoke test this. Oh. Yeah, there's a vacuum leak down there somewhere. See, now it's smooth. Alright, so now this is going to be on to a smoke test. Although, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this up in the air and see if I can't. I'm going to do a visual first before I go that crazy. But I know we have a vacuum leak by doing this. Like I said, you do something like this, you got to be super careful. Make sure you got fire extinguishers around. We got fire extinguishers everywhere here, so but you got to be super careful. Don't spray this directly onto a hot exhaust or anything like that, or a hot turbo. You're gonna be asking for problems. All right, let's put this thing up in the air. Let's see if we can't find something. Okay, so looking from underneath, there's nothing you can see. You can just see the underside of the intake manifold all the way up there, but there's nothing you can physically see that's going to be a vacuum leak or whatever. So we're going to definitely have to smoke test this thing. See if we can't figure out where the vacuum leak is. I'm also going to research the code real quick before I do that. I do recall something about intake manifolds possibly cracking, or the plastic, because they're plastic and they come in halves and then they're like sealed together. I do recall something about intake manifolds possibly coming apart. So we're going to look into that. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to shut it down. We're going to check this oil. I want to see what this oil actually looks like. Because it says it's way overdue. All right, let me just pull that out, wipe it down, and we're going to stick it again. Hang on a second, because I don't have my tripod handy. All right, so I just wiped it down. And it's low on oil, and it looks like mud. So it's supposed to be at the upper end. So I'm pretty confident it's 10,000 miles overdue for an oil change, if I had to venture a guess. All right, let me look up these codes real quick, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to smoke test this, I believe. Okay, so I got the shop smoke machine here, and I've had it heating up. And the funny thing about this is, if you remember, I made a video a little over a year ago where somebody sent me one of those. And I have one of these at home. The one I have doesn't have an air pump on it. This one actually has an air pump. This is a newer model. So what I did was I went to Harbor Freight and I bought just a air inflator for like $7. It was one of the ones that you would use just like basketballs and stuff like that. You're not going to use it to inflate car tires. It's not that powerful. But I figured that was strong enough to do this for $7. What the heck? I wonder if they saw the video and then decided to implement it on this, because I know it wasn't available at the time, but it is now. So this thing has pretty much just like an air inflator type pump on it. Right there. So the nice thing is with the switch, you can have it just heating up the fluid inside that makes the smoke, and then you can turn that little pump on, so this way you don't need an outside air supply. There, you can see the smoke. Kind of hard to see. Yeah, you see it there. So what I did was, I actually have a vacuum. I pulled that vacuum hose off. That's for the purge valve. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hook this into this vacuum hose here. I don't have my tripod, so let me try to do it one-handed. And now you start looking for smoke. You got to remember, you're going to fill everything up here, but you want to see where the smoke is coming from. And what I was talking about is, see that casting line right there? See it? Stuff like that can actually start leaking if it wasn't sealed correctly from the beginning. You know, from when it was assembled. You know, maybe it was sealed correctly. It just wasn't good enough. Who knows? But hopefully we could see some smoke here. You got to remember, it's got to fill up the whole intake manifold. But that smoke should start rising. Oop, hold on a second, let me shut the compressor off. Alright, definitely don't need a compressor for that. And I got smoke coming out from there, but nowhere else. Now, one big problem that is notorious on these things is the valve cover. I'm wondering if somehow or another it was sucking in. Man, that is just weird. Yep, well, it's coming out through that vent hole there. It's possible it was sucking in through there, the vapors, because I don't see any other leaks. So I got a funny feeling, since I don't see anything else anywhere else. The other known area of concern is this hose here for the turbo. But I don't see any smoke anywhere else. So I wonder if the vapors from that was just enough to travel up and get sucked through here. Meaning that there is a vacuum leak coming from there. Alright, well, what we're going to do is, since I don't see any smoke from anywhere else, other than right there, I'm going to turn off the smoke machine. I'm going to put that purge line back in place. We're going to start this up and I'm going to spray right there with brake clean, see what happens. Alright, so let me just disconnect this. Let's get the vacuum or the smoke detector out of the way. Smoke detector. Smoke machine, you know what I meant. Okay, snap that back in place. Now that smoke is an oil. See that? I don't know if any of you guys ever played with electric trains when you were younger, and some of them you can actually have smoke coming out of it. It's the same oil that you used in that. That's what creates the smoke. It just heats it up. So, all right, let's start this up. Now, in case some of you were wondering, you younger guys, you're like, what's he talking about with the model trains? It used to be model trains, you know, scale model trains that we used to get as kids. And a lot of guys still play with them. Don't play with them, it's a hobby. And they build like really intricate scenery and stuff like that. But a lot of the trains, when you had locomotives, you could put this oil into the locomotive and you would have smoke coming out of it to basically simulate, you know, a real old school train that had the smokestack coming out the top, or steam stack, whatever you want to call it. So, all right, back to this. Let's start this up. All right, so you hear the motor chugging along. Yep, that's it. I'm actually surprised the vapors went that far. And got sucked in through there. All right, so we got to start with a valve cover, and we're going to be doing an oil change too. All right, let me tell Rob so he can call the customer, and we're going to go from there. Alrighty, so we have a factory GM valve cover that we picked up that we're going to install on this Buick, and we have a set of spark plugs. So let's get going with this. We need some inverted Torx or female Torx, whatever you want to call those, and then male Torx for the coil. So let me go get some tools ready. Let me put you in a tripod, and we're going to start this job. All right, for the valve cover, we're going to use an E10 inverted Torx, female Torx, and then for the coil we're going to use a T30 Torx bit socket. Now what you need to do is disconnect the coil. There's not enough room. This has a locking tab that you have to move over. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing. Sometimes they will fight you. There we go. Sometimes they will fight you. Got my little screwdriver. All right. So now we're going to take this coil pack off. Pretty simple, just 2 bolts. Set the bolts. I usually set the bolts up in the cowl. Just make sure there's no hole in the cowl for you to like lose your stuff in. Gently pull the coil pack up to release the coil, the plug wires. And actually, these coils don't look too great. The boots rather. And one of them got stuck down inside because it actually broke the coil. See that? Dang it! The coil actually broke. I actually never had that happen before. Let me get something to dig that out of there, because now I'm going to have to get to my new coil. Hang on. Now, I'd say over the last 5-6 years, I have probably done... Wow, that doesn't want to come out. Ah, there it goes. Over the last 5 years or so, I have probably replaced 40 of these valve covers. That's the first time I've ever had one break. So, that's kind of new to me. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some compressed air and I'm going to blow around this thing. This way I don't have any dirt that could possibly fall into the motor once I have this stuff off. It's a little tight with the wiring, but you can get it out. Let me get an air gun for this, or an air blower, I should say. Hang on again 1 second. All right. That's all. Nothing really special. All right. So now, this cap and actually this tower piece here has to come off and get transferred to the new valve cover. The new valve cover does not come with that part. However, the new valve cover does come with the gasket already as part of it. So let me see what's involved in getting that off. I believe it's just a twist in place, but I'm not positive. Or wait a minute, this top collar comes off, I think. Right? Yeah, this top collar comes off, I believe, and then this whole thing twists out. Something like that. There's a little tab here. There's a little tab here. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing, because I can't watch the camera and do this at the same time. So I'm pulling out on the tabs to get them over the ribs. There we go. All right, so there's tabs here that basically go down and latch over this piece. So now this piece I could just twist to pull out. See that? All right, so that's how that all goes back together. So now we can take the actual valve cover off. Now the wiring harness on the end here, I believe, latches into the valve cover. Let me double check the other one. Yep. There's tabs over on this side, which are extremely difficult for you to see. Not quite sure which direction to go. Yeah. There we go. You push them away from you. And you just move it up and out to the side. This way you have the room. I tell you, I love these Milwaukee 1/4 and 3/8 ratchets. This one's not a fuel though. The other one is a fuel, which has more torque. That little 1/4 inch, I tell you what, that's got some cojones behind it. So we're gonna pull the dipstick out, and actually, what I'm gonna do is let me blow some more air over this thing, because now that I disturbed it, there may be more dirt particles free. Now, this should come up. I got all the bolts loose that I can see. gasket itself is probably just way stuck in place. And it is. All right, let me get something that I can pry up on that with. Hang on 1 minute. All right, so I've got a little pry bar here. Doesn't matter if we break the old one. But I try not to because it just makes life a little more difficult. There's like really no good spot. All that's doing is breaking that. This one is probably, there it's going. Really very uneventful. Nothing to really see there. So that's kind of the inside of it. A little gunky, not too bad. Doesn't look terrible on the inside. Chain is nice and taut still. All right, let me get some rags so I can wipe that down. Put the valve cover to the side. All right. Now, what I want to do is just wipe down and away from the inside of the motor. You don't have to go bananas. I know you guys like when I say that. You don't have to go bananas getting it spotless. It's not going to make a difference. But I'm going to show you what you do need to pay attention to. And as you can see, I'm just wiping it up. Here is actually the front, from the timing chain forward is the front cover. So there's actually a seam here. There's a seam here and a seam here. You can't see all that, right? Okay. So you got to make sure that that area is clean and good, because you're going to be putting some silicone there. Because if you don't, you're going to wind up with a leak. There's old silicone here, and I'm breaking it away and pushing it away. See that? I usually push it out of the way. Kind of like that. And the reason you're going to wipe and push away from the motor is because you don't want to wipe any of the debris into the motor. Or at least as little as you can possibly do. It's almost unavoidable getting something into the motor. Almost unavoidable. Just depends on how clean you are. Of course, certain areas are very difficult to get to. In a case where you have an area that's super difficult to get to, take a rag, bunch it up, and then I'll usually like tape it to the end of a screwdriver like this, and then use it to clean. Or even like a pry bar. You can take a pry bar like this and bunch it up on the end like so, and then tape it to the tool, and then just use it to wipe. Obviously, the tool is going to eventually break through your rag. So I am just picking off any of that silicone that's right there, making sure it gets pushed away. All right. Now this has a little bit of a heavier buildup of junk down here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a razor blade and clean some of this up. As you see, this side's clean, this side is not. That's because this side's closest to the exhaust, so this side gets hotter. So let me get a razor blade so I can clean some of this up, and then we're going to get some silicone. And let me get a light too, maybe add a little light to this. All right, so I got some light added to it. Now, like I said, there is a buildup of junk down there. If you look down in that area there, see that? So that's what I'm going to try to clean off now. And take a razor blade and just be gentle with it. I try to make, I just spit on myself. I try to make sure that I do not get anything down inside like one of the holes here, because it's like oil return usually, or something along those lines. I try not to. It's not always avoidable. You're not always going to be able to do it perfectly. So, just something to keep in mind. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put some brake clean on this rag. Like I said, it doesn't have to be spotless. As you can see, the areas where the gasket sits is fine. So there's really no reason to go bananas cleaning anything else off when the gasket surface itself, or where the gasket sits, is fine. You're not achieving anything by doing what I just said, like by over cleaning it. Because I know people that'll have to get like this whole area clean and like this whole area. There's no reason for it. It doesn't achieve anything, doesn't do anything, it doesn't benefit anything. You just want the area where the gasket sits to be perfectly clean, free of debris, free of sludge. That's pretty darn good. I'm happy with that. All right, I need to get some silicone, because like I said, we're going to silicone the ends here. So let me go grab that. Hang on a second. Oh, actually, you couldn't even see that because I had you too zoomed in. What I was saying is we're going to silicone the ends here where the front cover meets the head itself. Now, because we're a shop and we use silicone quite a bit and we're working on motors, excuse me, we usually get in like a caulk style size container. So on the end, when you use it and you have a little, even with the little squeeze tubes, leave some hanging out the end, you know, so it hardens up, because that acts like a plug. See that? And then next time you need to use it, it'll come out. Usually, not all the time. So now I'm just going to put some right across the seam itself. Right across the seam itself. That's all you got to do. You don't have to go nuts. So I'm going to leave some hanging out. I'm going to put this to the side. I'm going to put the new valve cover in place. Make sure your gasket's sitting where it has to be, just in case something popped out, because you don't want to drop it in place and all of a sudden pinch it. So now this will drop down in place. You got to move stuff out of the way usually. Get it to sit where you want it to sit. Kind of like that. And I always start the screws by hand, because if you don't start them by hand, what can happen is you can cross thread them. Make sure they all get caught, not just a couple. Okay, so now that that's all set in place, now we're going to tighten it down. Actually, I realized I wasn't fully on it right there. Now, each one of those bolts goes through a sleeve. The sleeve, the metal sleeve, is actually a shoulder. So it's almost impossible to over tighten these things. You're not going to tighten it up enough to warp the valve cover itself, because those metal sleeves are going to stop it. I'm just going lightly. And as you see, I tightened down in some semblance of a crisscross pattern or a circular pattern going from center out. All right, so now I'm going to tighten them. All right, now I'm just going to verify that everything's relatively tight, and I'm going to do that by hand. I'm going to get a short ratchet. You can use quarter ratchet. You can use a long ratchet too. Just be gentle with it, that's all. Let me go get my short ratchet. All right, so here's my little shorty 3/8 drive. See, I didn't catch that one with the gun, so. And then usually what I'll do at the end of something like this that's not like an ultra critical part in terms of torque, I will usually start at one end, work my way to the other, just to verify. And when you have something that you're going to use a torque wrench on, usually what I'll do is after I'm done torquing them, I'll go back over them again and hit it again. It's not like you're going to over torque it, because the torque wrench is going to click or show you the reading or whatever. So that's all good. So let's put this little piece on here. There's a direct way to put this on. Yes, no, maybe so. That, like that. We're going to be doing an oil change to this too. I'm not going to do it right now though. Okay, so that part of it's done. Let's just get the wiring harness back where it needs to go. And each car is a little bit different. They use this motor in a lot of different vehicles. Chevy Cruze is probably the most common one that I've worked on with this setup. All right, we're going to change these spark plugs real quick. All right, let me get my spark plug socket. All right, so I got my spark plug socket. Taking them out's not an issue. Using a gun. Not terrible, but they are worn. Yeah. Not terrible, but they are worn. So now's a good time to do it. Alrighty. So now we got our 4 brand new AC Delcos. Just opening up the boxes. taking them out. And here we are. We are just doing a visual check here. Okay. Gap is close to what that is. Let me actually verify what this gap is real quick. Find out what the gap is supposed to be. And then we're going to install them. Okay, now interestingly enough, the gap on these is 28 thousandths. That's what it actually calls for. So the original one is just about 29 thousandths. So here's the new plug, or here's one of them. Let's see. Okay, now 26. Let's say you want it to open. This is fine by me. But if you want it to open up, do not take the gapper. See, I actually got it stuck. Do not take the gapper. I'm going to show you on an old plug. Do not take the gapper and do this like you could with the old plugs. People would do this to open it up. They would use the gapper and actually, I keep getting the gapper stuck. You know why? Because these plugs are so hard, the iridium tips or whatever it is, it's actually denting the tool. But people would use the gapper and actually use it to force the gap open. And that's not how you do it. You know, you can go like this to force the gap open. Like, yeah, see, just like that. Don't do it that way. Let me take another old plug. What you do is, the right way to do it is take the gapper and take that little end and catch it in there. But don't, be careful, because there is, up inside there, there is another, see it up on the top edge there? There's another iridium tip. You don't want to take this and go all the way inside and grab it and possibly damage it. You just want to grab the very edge and then do that to open up the gap. See that? How it just opened up? Oh, this was the other plug. See that? So I got 29. Let's say I need to open this up to 40. Don't do it with this. Grab it with this and ever so gently move it, because it doesn't take much to move it. See that? Now, if you had to close that up, you tap it on the end of your workbench, or you take a small hammer and you just tap it lightly. It doesn't take much. You can bend those things pretty easy. So, like I said, these spark plugs themselves, I'm leaving them alone. They're close enough. You're not going to change the world by getting the gap to exactly what it calls for. It's not going to change anything. Matter of fact, this gap, if you went by millimeters, it calls for between 60 and 70 millimeters. So, just to give you an idea, there is room for adjustment there. Nothing to worry about. Now, I did put a touch of anti-seize on each of these plugs. Not much, just a little. You know, we're doing these by hand. You go down until you feel it make contact. There, it made contact. These are just about 3/4 of a turn too, just like those other plugs. But as you can see, the shadow on there, that's anti-seize. Just a little bit. Like I said, you're not making fried chicken. You don't have to baste them. Just a little bit is all you need. Screw them down by hand. Do not use impacts or anything like that. Can't tell you how often I've seen that. Feel the gasket crushing. There it goes. It's tight. You don't have to go nuts. Beyond that. Now, after I get these installed, I have to get a coil here. So I'm waiting on that, but I'm not going to see it for a little while. I'm very surprised that that tower snapped off the coil like that. But that usually means that the plastic is getting brittle. I've replaced a ton of those coils too, let me tell you. You know, for misfires and stuff like that. So we're good to go with that. So we're going to leave this alone for right now. Let me shut that light off. And we'll get back to this as soon as that coil pack comes in. All right, so we got the new coil pack. Like I said, I'm really amazed that that other one broke. I've never broken one before. So, but things happen. What are you going to do? Push it down in place. And now we can put the screws in for that. Just digging them out of the cowl where I laid them. Stuff left and right. Like I always say, make sure that you start the bolts by hand before you use any kind of a power tool, because power tools will make your life miserable if you mess up. They're great to have, but things can go wrong in an instant. So you gotta be mindful and be careful with them. The sticker's going to come off cleanly or not. Gonna see, will it? Yep, there's it. Alright, so now we put the coil connector back on. Shine a little light on the subject. And it's fighting me a little bit, so let me show you a little trick that I do. Hang on 1 second. What I will usually do on an electrical connector that won't go in cleanly, like this one's giving me a little bit of a fit. Whoops. Okay. I'll just spray it like that. And there, it locked in place. I think I mentioned the other day that throttle bodies on Chrysler products, like when I did those spark plugs, they have a tendency to be a real bear when it comes to that. So make sure you have everything in place the way it's supposed to be. We put the dipstick back in. We are still going to change the oil on this. I'm not going to show that in this video though. And let's start this up and see how she runs. Alright, so we're going to let her run for a minute, get some heat in it, and then we're going to see how she runs. Because remember before it was chuggling and everything else? So let's leave it run, get some temperature in it, and go from there. Alright, so the engine's hot. You hear a solenoid clicking. It's probably a purge solenoid. Engine's hot, running okay. It's not surging. We have a temperature gauge on here? Yeah. It's hot. I didn't clear the check engine light yet. But let me go find some brake clean. Hang on a second. Alright, so if you recall, this is what I did before, and the engine changed its tone. No change. Perfect. Kind of what I expected. Like I said, I've run into this way too many times in the past. So now we're going to shut it down, and I'm going to put that engine cover on. We're going to change the oil. I'm not sure if I'm going to walk you through that entire process. You've seen me change oil way too often. You know what? Yeah, I am, because I know a lot of you out there say you like to see me do stuff like that. So, all right, let's start it. I meant to say let's shut it down first, because you got to shut it down before you change the oil. Although I used to know a guy who hated his car, and true story, he would pull it in to change the oil. He would leave it running. He would leave it running, put it up in the air, pull the drain plug out, pull the filter off, put the new filter on, put the drain plug back in it after everything was drained out, let it back down while it's still idling, then start putting oil back in it. He did that on every oil change. The car never blew up. The heck was it? It was a Dodge Neon, actually. It was a Dodge Neon. Wasn't mine. I would actually never do that unless I wanted to blow something up, but yeah. So, all right, let's do this. All right, so the oil filter is a canister filter, and it is down here. So, first things first, we are going to break it free. And we're going to leave it hanging out down here. But you're going to break it free, and you're going to actually take the cap completely off, just leaving it in place. We're going to take the oil cap itself off, and then take the dipstick out. So now, just so you can see, the oil filter housing, you can see it down there. Let's see how it's just hanging out there? Completely loose. This way air can enter. This way all the oil drains down into the crankcase. So let's put this thing up in the air and let's drain the oil. All right, so now up in the air, there's the drain plug. There you see my oil drain. Just trying to put you in a position so you can actually see it. All right. Break it free, and I believe this is a aftermarket drain plug on here. I don't think that's a factory drain plug. Okay, and like I said, you want to change oil when oil is hot, and the reason for that is you change it when it's hot because it suspends debris, particles and stuff like that in the oil. It basically mixes up the oil inside the motor and gets any sediment that might be hanging out in the oil that would settle to the bottom. It actually gets it into the oil. So you have the engine hot, it'll suspend it in there for a while before it settles down to the bottom. It's kind of like an oil and vinegar mix for salad dressing. You know how eventually everything settles to the bottom? Same thing happens with stuff like this. Everything will settle to the bottom. So at least this way you start up, you get it running, it'll circulate the stuff, and this way you can dump it all out. So we're gonna let that drain for a little while. And in the meantime, I'm going to check tire pressures in that. I believe I left the compressor. Well, actually, I did shut it off. Hopefully it's got enough pressure in it. Hang on a second. All right. I apologize for this air chuck. It leaks like crazy with this lift. Tire pressures is another one where people are nuts, thinking they got to get the tire pressures exactly correct. The door says 34 psi. I have to be exactly 34 psi. And they don't take into consideration cold temperature, warm temperature, stuff like that. Usually I go slightly over on tire pressures, like the calls for 34, I go to 36, the calls for 32, I go to 34, stuff like that. And you go slightly over. Because tires will have a tendency to lose air pressure over a period of time. There's nothing you can do about it. It's a natural occurrence with a tire. Not all tires will, but most will. So I think we're done draining. Let's come up under here. Lower this. Oh, my AC just shut off. That's a tragedy. Now, hopefully you heard me about what I said about tire pressures. You know, just like spark plug gap, you don't have to go bananas making sure that it's exactly what it's supposed to be. I actually prefer going a little bit over because tires will lose pressure over time. Like even my own cars, if it goes for 36, I'll put them to 40, 45, something in that range. All right, let's let this thing down and let's change the filter and then add oil. Okay, so now looking down inside here, we're going to pull this filter assembly out. And it doesn't look horrible, but we're going to take the filter out of here. What I'm going to do is walk it over to the drain here. Back you up slightly. Shut this off. I'll be honest with you, this O-ring doesn't look like it's been changed in a while. Let me get a rag and let me get the new filter. Hang on. All right, so we have the new filter. Go in like that. So that. I tried putting it in backwards just to see if it would go, but usually they won't. If they have the ability to go in backwards on a cartridge style filter, usually that means it could go either way. So, but yeah, I don't think this gasket has been changed in a while. It's kind of flat. All right, back over to the car. And I know it's going to be difficult to see this. Let's see. I know it's going to be difficult to see, but to eyeball where the filter has to go, make sure there's no dirt and debris hanging out there and everything looks okay. Now we're screwing this thing in, and now I can feel the O-ring just contacted the base. So now with me screwing it in, it's actually, the O-ring is going past the edge of the base and it's going down. That's where the seal is made. The seal is not made by tightening up this type of a housing. The seal is made on the sides. So the seal there is already made. So now we're going to tighten this up. You see I'm using a big ratchet too. My big 1/2-inch ratchet, because it's a 1-inch, I believe, socket on there. Nope, 15/16, sorry. So I'm just going till I feel it bottom out. And there, it bottomed out. I stopped. I'm not going to go any further. You don't have to go any further. The seal was already made 2 turns ago. So that just prevents it from walking its way out. All right, so now let's put oil in it. All right, let me get a funnel, and then let's add oil. Hang on. All right, so I bought one of those funnel kits. See how it works out. I'm actually not overly crazy about this one that I picked out because it just, I don't know. It got a good rating, but I'm just not crazy about it. I mean, it doesn't leak or anything. Just it seems the one that Kirk has actually seems to be a much nicer piece. I got to verify the oil level on this thing. I don't know what it takes, quantity-wise. I mean, I know it takes 530 Dexos, which is what this is. There, that's about 4. So let me verify how much oil this thing actually takes before I go any further. So I will be right back while I go verify. Okay, so it actually calls for 4.2 quarts, yep. And I just added just over 4 quarts according to that. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this funnel out of here, stick it to the side, put the Earl cap back on, put the divvy stick back in, and we're going to start it up. After it's run for a moment, build up oil pressure, we shut it down. All right, so now let's check the oil level. Whenever you're checking your oil on your car, do it at the same time. Meaning, either you drive it and then you check it, or you have it running and you check it, or it sits overnight and you check it. Preferably, Nancy needs a little bit more. Preferably, you run it for a minute and then check it, because the level will change. Why, might you ask? Because what happens is when you have it running, oil collects in certain areas, and it takes a while for it to drip down. If you check your oil first thing in the morning, the oil level is usually higher. So it needs a little bit more, not a full quart, maybe a quarter of a quart. I got a funny feeling that's going to be perfect. Let's wait a second. Let's let that run down inside the motor. Now we'll check it again. And yep, I am happy with that. That's perfect. All right, so let's take the oil funnel off. Catch any oil just in case. I just put the funnel up inside the oil drain, the other one I have here. All right. Put the little trim cover on, and we are about ready for a road test. Okay, let me get ready for a road test. All right, so I just cleared out the codes. I reset the oil maintenance thing, and it should be good to go. Let's just go. No, not that. Hold on. Info. Yeah. Now, don't fret over tire pressures like that, because it usually takes time for that to reset, because that's obviously inaccurate. I just set all the tire pressures. So, all right, let's go for a road test. All right, so the car drives great, and I made it to Mexico. I'm in the secret testing facility, and I want to show you something that I can do with the scanner here, real quick. Pretty easy. So I got this screen here, and I can actually enter the desired trouble code, P0300. Okay, this ignition cycle had passed since clear it was passed, since last test it was passed. There's no history and there's no mill requested, the check engine light basically. That code was the first code set the last time, because remember, the engine was chuggling. So I can enter a code and it'll go into the computer to see if it ran that code while driving. Basically it's a monitor, and it ran it and it passed it. So it's no longer misfiring. The car runs great. So it's amazing a valve cover could do that. You wouldn't think so, but it can. So just wanted to point that out. But yeah, we're going to head back to the shop and we are going to finish this up. All right. Got to cross the border. All right, so there it is. The road test is done. It runs fantastic. So I'm happy with that repair. Now, just remember, the auto parts store said try to sell them an O2 sensor. Wouldn't have fixed anything. Would have fixed nothing. Yes, it had an O2 code, but the O2 code is because it was running lean because of the valve cover creating a vacuum leak. That's why. So, going to the parts store and getting a code, it's a tool in your toolbox. That's all it is. It's not the be-all, end-all. If they try to sell you a part, be leery. If that was the only code in there, for an O2, like if it was a heater code or something like that, then yeah, okay, then I could see that. But not with all these other codes. That makes no sense. They were just trying to sell parts. That's all they were doing. So you gotta be leery. You gotta pay attention. Oh, and I got to meet 82 Kid today. Joe, thank you for stopping by. Really appreciate it. He drove all the way down from Jersey to say hi. So he actually was considering moving to the area. That's why he actually stopped by. So it was a pleasure meeting you, and look forward to seeing you again. So again, thank you. But yeah, so I got a message. So I was reading a message at the same time. So anyway, but yeah, that's it. Just be, like I said, you get a code from a parts store. They're trying to sell you something. Just be mindful of that. Think about it. Does it make sense? And it's another tool in your toolbox. That's all. All right, so that's it. Hopefully you got something to that. I did. That was a job well done, as far as I'm concerned. When I say job well done, meaning found the problem, we fixed it, it's good, the car can go now. So, job well done. All right, that's it, guys. Have a great day. Keep wrenching.